In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use Fusion to create this composite sequence here. Now, the first thing we want to do is to track the shot. And once we got the track, then we can place all these 3D elements and then composite it together. Now, Fusion runs on a node-based system, okay, as you can see in this node structure here. All right, so let's start from the beginning. First, I'm going to start a brand new comp, and then I'm going to load in the image sequence. So once you brought in the loader node, and in order to see the sequence, you can press either 1 on your number key to show on the viewport 1, or press 2 or show it in the viewport, the second viewport. Now, to fit the views, you can just select on the viewport by clicking on it and press Ctrl F. So I'm going to click on this viewport and press Ctrl F to zoom to fit. You can also click on these white dots here. It represents which view you are looking at the footage. So I'm going to click on this. You can click and notice you can turn them on and off. All right. So if you only want to see one of the viewports, in this case viewport 2, you can click on this icon here to just show one view. All right. So the sequence is only 53 frames in length, and the default is 1000 frames. So I'm going to just double click on this timeline here and then change it to 53 frames. And right now I'm going to load this into the memory. So I'm just going to hit play and it's going to load the frames in the memory. Okay, and then we can review the footage. Over here, this button here, I can change the playback type to ping pong so that you will go back and forth. So this allows me to study the footage a little bit better. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to track this footage. We want to be able to place good points in this shot so that we can get a good parallax, so the solver will be able to give a very good result of the 3D space. Now we have some issues here. The actress is wearing this very shiny costume, and it produces a lot of highlights, and there's also reflections here on the table. So we need to create a mask to mask out these areas. And also there doesn't seem to be a lot of good quality trackers on the table, and we need to enhance the footage so that the camera tracker of Fusion will be able to capture the details. So first I'm going to add a unsharp mask to it. So to bring in a new node, first click on the node window here and then press a shift spacebar to bring the node tool selector, and then I'm going to bring in a unsharp mask. Okay, notice every tool has its own acronym, so if you type USM, you'll be able to bring the unsharp mask. Okay, I prefer using the unsharp mask over the sharpening tool because it gives a much better result. Now, if you want to see what the unsharp mask does to the footage, make sure the node is selected and you click on the second button here, which will show you the result of what the unsharp mask does. All right, so if you can show, I'm going to show you the two screens first. For example, this is the loader input of the sequence. This is before and this is after. If I can zoom in and can show you the difference, you can see the default settings already adding a little bit of sharpness to the footage. So I can click on the unsharp mask, okay, and sharp mask showing in viewport 2, and you can go over here. This is the inspector where you can drag and increase the sharpness, okay, of the footage. Okay, right now it is appearing much sharper. Okay, I'll advise not to overdo this, otherwise you get this fringe effect. Right. So now I pull up extra detail. Now I want to change the brightness of the footage. So I'm going to assign a color corrector. There are a bunch of color corrector nodes here, which you can just click and bring it out. So these are like some of the more commonly used tools here. So you can use a color corrector. Now notice whichever node that you selected and you click on adding a node, you'll be connected to the node, right? So now I'm going to click on color corrector. Now again, if I want to see the result of the color corrector, I need to press on the second button, which is in this case what the color corrector is doing. So I'm going to press Control F here. Now, if you adjust the sliders, you can see the result of the color corrector affecting the footage, right? And you notice that because of the way I place a sequence of the nodes, I've noticed some color banding, and this is something which is not what I wanted. So basically, I can change this by switching the sequence of the nodes. So to do that, I'm going to disconnect. Okay, to disconnect the node, just simply drag, and then I'm going to drag this color corrector node, put it between the input and the unsharp mask. Now, holding down the shift key first, and then you can move it over the links until it turns into this blue and orange, or rather blue and yellow color, and then release. So now, if I look through the unsharp mask, okay, the color banding has disappeared. I no longer see any color banding. Okay, so this is just a trick to show you that you can actually change the sequence, okay, of the nodes. Okay, so right now you can see the nodes are moving all over the place, and I want it to really stay within these grid points, so you can actually force these nodes to line up according to the grid crosses. So to do that, just right mouse click, go to Arrange Tools, and then turn it on to Grid. And then to line up everything, you just right mouse click, and then line up all tools to Grid. Okay, so it will jump to the nearest grid. So I'm just gonna grab these nodes and then rearrange them. Okay, so now I'm going to isolate just this viewport. Let's take a look at this footage, and you can see now, because of the unsharp mask and the color correction, you can see much more details on the table, and this will make it easier for the camera tracker to track. All right, so let's bring in the camera tracker. So with the node selected, press Shift Spacebar, and then press Camera, which is start with C, and you notice when you press C, anything that starts with C will be listed. And we're going to use the camera tracker, CTRA, and then add. So now we have the camera tracker, and we will see what the camera tracker will actually want to track. So this is the camera tracker's tools. Okay, so we start first by looking at what it will track. So we can actually preview by clicking on this preview button here. And but we need to see the result of what the camera tracker is doing. So you need to select the camera tracker node and then press number 2. And with this preview switch on, it will show you where the camera tracker will most likely track. And you'll notice straight away it goes for the costume and the highlights of the actress. Okay, so this is going to be a problematic for us because we need to track good stationary points. We do not want to track points that are moving around, because later during the solving, when they are reprojecting the points back to the footage, you will end up with a lot of errors and you will not be able to recreate the 3D space properly. So what we need to do is we need to create a mask to mask out the actress and the table, because the table contains a lot of reflections, unwanted reflections that we do not need, and it will cause a lot of issues. The points that we are more interested in are, okay, these areas here, high contrast points, okay, and this dot here, there's a dot that stays at the background, okay, which is very good, and then these corners here, and you can see there's a preview dot already there. So we had to create a mask for it so that it will not give us a false result. So I'm going to apply a mask. So to apply a mask, first make sure you select the camera tracker, and then click on the polygon, or this is actually the rotoscope tool. When you click on it, you go into this node or mask creation mode. Okay, so I'm going to start by masking out this table. Start at the bottom. Now to zoom in and zoom out, you just hold down to Control, and then to close it. Now to zoom in and out, you hold down to Control, and then you middle mouse click, roll in and out. So I don't think I closed the mask properly. You can see there's a gap there. Okay, so to close it, there's a tool over here that allows you to close the gap. Okay, so if I have this extra, if you have an extra point that you don't need, you can just select it and delete it. All right, so now I have the tables all masked out, and you notice it says polygon. So let me just rename the node by selecting the node first, then pressing F2. I'm going to call it table mask. So we want to mask out this area so that the tracker will not put trackers on this table. All right. So first we need to keyframe the roto points or roto vertices, because we do not want the table to get out of the points. So you can see, yes, although the table stays within the point, we still want to animate the roto points. So to do that, first we go to the first frame. Okay, I'm going to do some bit of adjustments. Then we go to the last frame and then move the points. Now you do not have to click on set key or anything like that. Fusion will automatically set the keyframes for you. So as I scrub back and forth, you notice the points that I have moved between the key points are already animated. Now every time you set a key, you notice there's a white slash or white point along the keyframe, along the frame in the timeline indicator. Okay, so now we can see also what the mask actually looks like. So click on the node and then click on the second button here, or you can press number 2, and it'll show you a preview of what the node looks like. So now you can see we have a animated mask that masks out the table. But take note, anything that is white will be allowed through. So that means we're actually tracking everything on the table. So we do not want that. We want to track anything that's out of the table. So if you click on the table mask node and we look at the inspector, make sure you switch it to invert, because we want to track the details outside of the table mask. All right, so let's go back to the camera tracker, and then now you notice the preview. The table, there are no more points on the table, but you notice there are still points on the actress. So what do we need to do? We need to create a mask to mask out the actress. Now the industry standard is to create separate masks for the head, for the shoulders, arms, and maybe the torso. But to keep this tutorial more straightforward, I'm just going to mask out the entire body, and furthermore, she remains rather stationary, so we don't really need to create multiple masks. Okay, so I'm going to create another mask. So with the table mask node selected, you can click on the create the roto mask and start by going to the first frame, and we will draw a frame over the actress, and then you can click on this button to close, and then I'm going to scrub to the last keyframe. Then I'm going to left mouse click and drag, and then select all the points and then push it to the left, and you notice that now your mask actually is animated. Okay, so now we're going to continue to animate this mask to make sure that she's properly covered. So I'm going to go over to the center of this entire sequence, and then I'm just going to fine tune my mask. Okay. Try your best to leave a gap between the actress and the outside, because we do not want to track anything on her. Right, so now we got an extra key here. Okay, so I'm going to study the frame here, and over here I think her shoulder between 0 and 28 looks fine. Okay, maybe right about 27 her finger is touching this area. Okay, and then here, okay, right about this frame I need to change it here. Now there's a good detail on this area here, so you can just simply click on the mask and then just pull in another mask, or rather a control vertex. Okay, because I really want to track this area here. And the good thing about this is that it will automatically add the key for you. Right about here, the last keyframe, so I'm going to adjust all these keys, and because I need I really want to track this one because this will give me a good parallax solve later on. Okay, so you can fine tune by just moving along different portions of the timeline. I'm going to get rid of this point here. Okay, pressing Shift S will actually make this point become smooth. So if you don't need it to control the handle to make it smoother, then you don't have to do that. Okay, so right now I'm just going to make sure. Okay, right at this point here, I want this to move in. Okay, almost literally every single frame. Okay, so I really want to make sure that I can track this highlight point here. So I'm just going to add more keyframes around this area. Okay. All right, so her finger is punching through the mask at that frame. And let's take a look at the mask. Okay, so let me rename this. I'm going to call this body mask. I'm going to click on the second button and see the result. And you notice we have an issue with the mask. Okay, this is not what we want. We want this to be black. So in order to do that, we had to change the paint mode from merge to subtract. So we add on to the mask to block out the actress and the table. Okay, so let's go back to the camera tracker, click on the node, and then click on the result. So now you can see there are no points in the preview, there are no points on the actress herself. And in fact, there are some points on the area which I wanted to track. Okay, and if there is actually a point that I wanted to track here, but you notice that it's not being activated because we need to go to the camera tracker itself and we need to reduce the gutter size to as low as possible. So notice when I pull down the gutter is like a gap between the frame, right? So when I pull it down to the minimum value, right, I can't seem to bring this down to 0. It is always stuck at 0.5. So now I can see I can have this point track. So that is where I want to track. Now the detection threshold and the minimum features separation. So if you reduce the distance of separation, you notice that the points will bunch up together more. But if you put the separation further, okay, the points will spread out more. Okay, for this case, I think I'm going to have it spread out more. That's fine. There's no reason for me to track at such a huge density. So I'm going to use a very low density. Okay, in fact, the lowest as I can. And I'm going to look around and make sure that it's tracking the points that I want. Okay, seems about right. I can adjust this a little bit more. And also you can change what type of color or track channels you want to change to track. Luma in this case will track for the brightness and contrast. You can also track for specific colors, right? In this case, red, there doesn't seem to be a lot of red appearing. Green, no. Blue, okay, there's a lot of blue. But I think Luma still gives me a overall better result. So sometimes you can switch between these colors to give a better chance of detecting features. Another thing is we want to enable bidirectional tracking so that when the tracker finds a good point, it will track backwards again to confirm the position of the point. All right, so all of this looks good, so I can start my auto track right now. So I'm going to hit auto track. So what's happening right now is that the tracker will go through the entire 50 plus frames and backwards, and then these are the result that it gives you. Okay, what are the green point? The green point is the preview. You can turn the preview off. So if I scrub back and forth, you'll notice that yes, the points that I want are tracked, but it also gave me a lot of garbage points. We can see that there are some points that are moving up and down. So those points are actually not very good. So this is not a very good result for me. Now you can spend time to just click and drag and select and delete these points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to just press Ctrl Z to undo, Ctrl Z again to undo to the point where I start from the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the detection threshold. I'm going to scrub along the, sometimes you need to scrub along the timeline to give yourself a preview. I'm going to scrub this distance, okay, the detection threshold until it is quite low, as in it will not give me points all over the place. It will only give me points which is very, the tracker is very certain that, yeah, this is a good point over there, and so on. Okay, so I brought the sliders up to these values, and then now I'm going to try tracking again. Now by default, you use something called optical flow tracker. All right, and it generally works pretty well and it's very fast. But if you want something more precise, I prefer using the planar, and then the distortion type I use affine. There's transform, transform, rotate scale, affine, and then perspective. Now this will be a slightly slower tracker, so if you have a lot of frames to track, okay, so this one's going to take a while. But comparatively to the optical flow, this one is much slower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this track. I'm going to adjust the values again, and then sometimes you might need to adjust the pattern size, and you must make sure that the preview allows you to see that there are some good points that are being tracked. So I'm happy with this. Then now I can hit auto track. You can see the speed is much slower, but this will give you a much more accurate result. And then that's it. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the preview track. And then this time I'm going to study the track points. Now we still have some garbage track points in the beginning here, and their appearance is quite minimum. So I'm going to do some cleanup right now. Okay, I'm going to go over to, first I'm going to click on this second icon here. Now for this shot, in my experience in solving this shot, 40 millimeters for the focal length is pretty good. It gives me consistently good result. So you can put it at 40. Now I don't know what type of camera is used to take this shot, so we'll leave it at the default. Now we will go to the cleanup. There are a total of 96 tracks, 96 track detected. So we want to get rid of those tracks that appear for a short while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this track filtering, and I'm going to bring it up to 10. Okay, notice that any track points, right, that appear for less than 10 frames or minimum 10 frames will be selected. I do not want these points, so I can hit delete. Right. So right now I'm left with 14 track points. Not a lot of track points, okay, but we can now easily decide which track points are good or which track points are not. And this track point doesn't look very good to me because it's sliding up and down, so I'm going to delete it away. Okay, and then this track point is no good as well. You will notice that, hey, if I continue to delete, then aren't I going to run out of good track points? Yes, in fact, right now I only have about 12 track points, and it is impossible to solve this with only 12 track points. So now we selected, or rather we have the track points that we have, okay, are pretty solid. They don't move around that much. Okay, they pretty much stick to where they are supposed to be. So now we're going to help the tracker a little bit. We're going to force the tracker to track only the details that we want. Now, if you look over here, there are a couple of dark points or highlighted areas that are very good for tracking. There's also a good highlighted area here, the sharp points, the sharp corners here. They are very good for tracking. So we are going to create a mask that forces the tracker to look at these areas and then just to track them. So to do that, okay, now I don't need the mask anymore. I can disconnect them and then put them aside. All right. And we're going to create a custom mask. Okay, I'm going to use a square roto mask, and then I'm going to connect it to the mask. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the corner here, change the size of the scale, click on the center, and then move it to the area of interest which I want to track. In this case, this area here with all these tracks. So you can click on this center transform. You can click on the corners to change the size of the scale of this roto box. Okay, if you look at the roto, okay, so this is by clicking on the second button here, which is viewport number 2. The white indicates that this is the area that we want the tracker to track, okay, based on the mask. Okay, so now we need to animate this mask. So at the first keyframe here, that's fine. Now if we go to the inspector, we need to go to enable keyframing on the square mask. And then as I scrub forward to the last keyframe, I need to grab the center and push it to the center here. Now you can hit playback and see and observe and make sure that the mask is following the section that you want it to track. So yep, it is following, that's good. Now we go to the camera tracker and then we go back to the track again, and we are going to add on more track points. Okay, so right now we don't see any preview points. If we change the color maybe to red, okay, no result, green, no result, okay, then maybe perhaps we need to increase the detection threshold. I'm going to bring this down. And yeah, now when we bring down the sliders, you can see the points are starting to appear. Now try not to bring it down too much. At least I got one good point here and then this point here. And I'm going to try Loomer. Red seems to give me a good result. Again, you need to scrub the timeline forward backwards to help the tracker a little bit. And I can see a couple of points which I like, so I'm going to use that spot. Now if you really like, for example, if you really wanted the tracker to force the tracker to track only this region, you can reduce the size of the rectangle, because right now the rectangle is also detecting features along this area which I don't want to. So I only want to track that area, this area here. So go to the last keyframe, make sure that it's this area, middle of the keyframe here, and then that's it. Okay, so going back to the camera tracker, okay, right now I'm more satisfied. Can I bring in more features maybe? And maybe the detection threshold distance, bring it less a little bit. Okay, now I'm ready to track. So I'm going to hit auto track. And you can see it managed to track 2 points very well. There are a few garbage track points which you can manually delete them later on. Okay, now it's tracking backwards. So the only good points are these 2 points here. The rest are like moving all over the place. Okay, so turn off preview auto tracks. We're going to scrub through the timeline, and then if we see any bad points, I'm going to manually select them and delete them. Now, points that appear and disappear, right, can sometimes cause havoc to your solve. So it's a good idea, right, to remove. Like for these points, they only appear for a few frames. Okay, better get rid of them. And then you can see these are details that just move up and down. This can give you a bad solve. This one as well, these two. Okay, so these two are excellent points. Well, so we're going to keep these two. Okay, so now how many points do we have now? So we go to the solve portion. Now we have 14 trackers. Okay, and let's focus on this area here. So this area here has good corners, right? And it will give you a very good track points. And also because it's closer to the camera, it gives you a good parallax solve. So we can use the same rectangle again, and we're going to get rid of the keyframe animation by simply going over to the key here, right mouse click, and remove path. So now it doesn't have any animation. So bring the rectangle over here. We can resize the rectangle just for these spots here. Okay, and then slide to the last keyframe. Go to the first keyframe first. Remember to reactivate the center keyframe, and then move it here. Go to the center frame, slide the timeline, and then set an extra keyframe. Make sure that the box stays within that region. All right, and then go back to the camera tracker again. Turn on, go back to the tracking portion. Turn on the preview the auto track locations. Right now we have too many track points. I do not need so many features, so I'm going to reduce, and then the distance, I'm going to increase the distance spread so that I only have the points which I really want. Like for example, this one on the edge here. Okay, I'm going to try auto track again. It's pretty good. It's tracking that point very well. Okay, a couple of garbage points there. Now uncheck the preview, scrub forward, and then we're going to take out those 2 points. They only appear for a couple of frames. In fact, I think, yeah, it doesn't appear anymore. All right, so we got a few good points over here, and let's see how many points we have now. We have 19 points now. Okay, so now there's another point for this particular shot. At least we need to track something that is closer to the camera. Now if you look closely on the table, because of our enhancements, we can see things like a hair strand and dust spots. So these details, right, can be tracked as well, and it will add a lot to solve the position and the trajectory of the camera that will match properly. So again, I'm going to reuse the rectangle. I'm going to get rid of its keyframe, remove the path, and then I'm going to drag and move it over to this hair strand here, which is a great detail over here. So you can see I resized the mask until it is a small region because I only want to track this shape here. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the keyframing animation on again. Go back to the last frame and drag the center box here. Go to the center of the timeline. Okay, then go between the keyframes, and then you just gradually start to add more keyframes just to make sure that the pattern stays within. This is almost like setting keyframes for tracking. Okay, so you can preview this. Make sure that the box is following the pattern or detail that you want to track. Okay, so I'm happy with this. Go back to the camera tracker and turn on the preview. Okay, I'm going to try the different color channels and see which one gives me a good result. Red seems to be fine, so I'm going to bring down the distance threshold and just let it rip. You just need to track one really good point, and then in this case using the red channel, and fantastic, this is a continuous track. Okay, and it stays there very well. So we got 1 point over there. So now we want to track another piece of dust here. So go back to the rectangle, delete away the key. Now if you want to keep the shape, you can actually create a brand new rectangle and track it all over again. You just need to remember to remove the mask again if you don't need it. But in this case, I'm going to reuse this rectangle. I'm going to remove the path and then re-enable the animation again. Then bring this over to this dust dot here, and I'm just going to make it really tight here. Then go back to the last keyframe, then drag it over here. Now notice the bottom detail where the box actually travels from right to left. Oh, sorry, from left to right, and in this case it travels from right to left. All right. So we need this information to give to the tracker so it is able to solve a good solve or give a good solve. So right now I'm adding keyframes and make sure the box follows the dot. So remember, you start from the beginning and the end, and then you just go between all these keyframes and continue to refine and adjust until it really follows dead center at this little dust particle. Okay, so just to confirm that it stays there, yes, I'm happy with this. So let's go back to the camera tracker again. So this time I'm going to enable the preview of the track, and you can notice that it's actually tracking slightly above. Let me see, Luma will give me a better result. Yeah, Luma tracks something at the bottom. Now, for my experience, because this is a very small detail, what I can do is that I can really increase the number of details, the minimum feature separation. I'll just push it down as much as I can, right? Because you have to take note, this mask is really tiny. It's like literally a dot itself. So even if there's a lot of track points being tracked in this point here, it is still okay. All right, so I'm going to hit auto track now. Okay, I'm seeing 3 points. Generally, they are following the positions. Okay, but I would have preferred that it stays more at the center. So I'm going to undo this track, and I'm going to try another color channel. Maybe try red, and then I'm going to just increase the density, and then I'll do an auto track again. Okay, red seems to give me a better result than Luma. Okay, it's generally sticking to the same region. There are some points that appear and disappear. Like for this one, I'm going to delete that. I'm going to turn off the preview. Okay. Now, these points appearing and disappearing, they might cause some jittering effects in the final path of the solve. Okay, but I think we have enough points now, and they are in fairly good positions. We can now do a test solve and then see what's the result. Now, before we do that, always save your work. Okay, so we already established this as a 40mm lens, and then now we can hit solve, and we get an error of 0.33, which is excellent, and it's actually pretty close to the focal length that we want. But we do not know whether the camera is moving correctly or not. Now, if you play back and watch this footage carefully, all right, so let me just turn off the ping pong effect. So just turn it into a loop. Okay. So if you look at this footage, you will realize the camera is actually moving from right position and slowly to the left. So if you did not track enough good points, you can sometimes end up with the camera movement moving from the left to the right, which is wrong. Okay, so the correct movement of the camera should be from the right to the left. All right, so let's check and verify, see whether the distance is really moving correctly. So I'm going to create a merge 3D node. Okay, you can use a transform node as well for this. And I'm going to drag the bottom link and then join it to the merge 3D. And I'm going to click on the press number 2 to show it in 3D view. So this will show you the result of the track. And I'm actually having a very, very good track here. You can see the trajectory of the camera is moving from, if I play back, right to left. There's some noise here, and you can see there's some jitteriness here, but it is very, very minor, and you will not be able to see it in the final result. And let me just split this into 2 views, and I'm going to change the camera tracker into viewer number 1. Okay, so you can see the camera is moving from, this is the top view, moving from right to left. And you can also see the color coding here. Now, if you see yellow, that means there's some slight errors. But if you see green, that means that the projection is good. That means whatever the camera is projecting through the points, it is hitting it with very low errors. That means these points are stationary and they're good. So you notice that this particular point here is moving around up and down. So, and it's yellow. So we can actually delete this. Right now our error is 0.3361. So by deleting that point, we can hit solve. It might give us a better result. Notice the path actually smoothed out a little bit. Okay. Also, you can look at the path to check for bumpiness. Like for example, if you notice there's a lot of bumpiness, sometimes it could mean that points are appearing and disappearing, and this will affect the smoothness of the trajectory. Okay, but you have to be very careful. Make sure you do not become overzealous and delete too many points. Otherwise, you will not be able to solve this properly. All right. For this example, I'm happy with this solve. Okay, I've got previous solves where the line is almost completely flat, but I think for this example, this is good enough. Okay, there is enough information for me to recreate the 3D space of the camera. So by doing this, this allows me to preview what the camera is moving at. The next stage is I want to export out the 3D camera position of the camera itself. So this can get a little bit complicated. So let me just change this view back to the second view first. And we are now going out to export out the 3D scene. All right. So if you open up the inspector of the tracker, 3D tracker, you see something like the 3D scene transform, align, unalign, and so on. Okay. I'll go through them slowly, and then you will find out what all these means. Export options, you export the camera, an image plane containing the background showing uh, the image sequence, then a ground plane, which is a 3D mesh plane, and of course a renderer so that it renders the final result, and a point cloud. Okay, so if we don't do anything and we just hit export right now, all right, you notice that a bunch of new nodes have been exported out. All right, and if you look through the merge 3D node, okay, you will see that it has exported a mesh out for you. Okay, it has a brand new camera. Now, to look through this camera, move your cursor over here to this symbol here that says perspective. Right mouse click on it and then switch to camera 3D. And then you can hit play. Right, so it's going to render everything all over for you again. But you notice that the grid line or the floor plane is actually floating above in space. You want the grid line, preferably, to actually be stuck onto the table, so that whatever you create from the origin, all right, will be there. Although the movement is correct, but you want the floor plane to be down here. Now, due to the nature of this particular shot, we are not able to create, or we do not have enough points, right, on this flat plane, right, to indicate where the flat ground plane is. So we will have to manually adjust to position this ground plane there. Okay, so we will keep the export out. The good thing about this camera tracker is that we can go back to the original camera tracker. We're going to look through the camera tracker by pressing number 2. Let me make sure I'm looking at number 2. Okay, right now I'm looking at the camera number 2. All right, and if I click on the merge 3D, okay, and I look at camera number 2, and if I click on the camera tracker again, all right, so right now I'm adjusting the camera tracker, but what I'm looking at is the merge 3D node as indicated in the viewport here. So we want to position the grid down to the table position. Okay, so to do that, we had to go over to the export panel again, and then we need to change from align to unaligned. So when it's unaligned, we have the choice of repositioning the grid, right? So I'm going to position the grid at this point here. Now I have this point cloud that is obstructing my view, so I'm going to temporarily turn off the point cloud. To do that, I'm going to select the point cloud, Then I'm going to disable it by clicking on this switch. Then I'm going to click on Merge 3D, then click on Camera Tracker again. And basically, I'm just going to select one of the points. Select one of the points, and I'm going to indicate, okay, sorry, I need to go to Camera Tracker again. I need to select this point. Okay, this is very important. Make sure you select the point, not the cloud, right? Not the cloud points. Go to Camera Tracker, make sure that you're looking at the correct view. In this case, this is viewport 2. Select the point which you want the grid position to be at. Then, under Origin, click on Set from Selection. So right now, when you export again, the grid is going to appear here instead. Okay? So, because we can't see the result, you want to see the result, you have to click on the Merge 2D again. Then I'm going to go back to the Camera Tracker. And then you can say Update Previous Export. Now, when you've done that, you go to Merge 3D, and we look through at the Merge 3D. You notice, hey, now the grid has been positioned over there. Okay? But, okay, if you go back to the Camera Tracker, we are still at unaligned mode. So that means the grid will not move there. We need to change it to align. Then you click on Update Previous Export. And if you look at the result, now you can see the grid is actually lined up over there. All right. So you can see, although the grid and then this floor plane, this ground plane, right, is lined up over there, it is not flat and aligned with this table. So we need to manually rotate this until it lines up. Okay, so to do that, we have to go back to the Camera Tracker. Now I need to get the Camera Tracker out from Viewer 1 first. So now I'm going to Viewer 2. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this Merge 3D. I don't need this. And okay, let's see. You turn this thing on. Okay, so right now I'm at Camera Tracker, but yet I'm looking at the result of this export. Okay, so I'm going to turn off to Unalign, and I'm going to temporarily hide the grid because I don't need to see the grid. And I can also change the scale of my ground plane. Okay, right now I want to make the ground plane bigger. Maybe I change the size to 20. Then I say Update Previous Export. Now I can see it's bigger. So when it's bigger, it's easier for me to adjust the orientation to match this table. So I need to position this grid until it is the center of this table. So to do that, first I need to move the Y position. Now, if you have not done this before, the first time you're doing it is going to be a bit confusing. So I'm going to move this origin position here. Then I'm going to click on Update. So it's going to move the grid there as well. And then I'm going to rotate it. So you can use the slider here to rotate slightly and update. Okay, right now I rotated way too much. Okay, now if you want to rotate fine rotation, you just select the numbers, you can slide back and forth. Okay, you can actually click and slide back and forth. If you want a much more finer adjustment, you can hold down to the control key. Okay, right now I'm just going to bring this down first. Okay, and then I'm going to update. Okay, that looks about right. Okay, now for the position, I'm going to push it forward some more. Then update. Update again. Okay, and then I think I need to rotate it a little bit more. Okay, so you can see most likely I'm going to rotate the X position down some more. So rotate it forward, down a little bit. And you can see now the perspective lines are matching. Okay, and X position a little bit more. So you can spend a little bit of time, right, just to get this to match up nicely. Okay, I'm trying to get this to match as much as I can. Okay, pretty much. I think the lines, you can see it is parallel here. It's parallel here, parallel here. I think I've got this lined up. Okay, so I can now change this back to aligned and then update previous export. So if you look through the Merge 3D now, we are pretty sure that this is actually lined up nicely. And now, previously we are not able to change the scale of this grid in the y-axis, but once it's exported as the ground plane, you can do that. So you can go to the scale portion of the inspector for the ground plane, and then I'm going to unlock the scale, and then start to change the scale in the y-axis. So I'm going to scale this down, then I'm going to move it down up in the z-axis. Then the x-axis, I'm going to just scale it a little bit narrower, and then move it along the x-axis until it slides into place. And I got my table nicely matched up. So if I play back, you can see that my table is aligned. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, it can seem a little bit complicated, but you need to do this a couple of times to get familiar with it. You can see the alignment is just still a little bit off. Okay, if you want, you can just manually go to rotate. So I'm just gonna select the y-axis and holding down the control key, just rotate it ever so slightly. Can do some fine-tune adjustments to get it to match. And I think I'm happy with this. All right. So now we can do our effects. Now we can get rid or disable the filters that make this sharp and bright. So I'm going to the original footage and I'm going to disable the unsharp mask and also the color corrector. So this is the original footage. And we got our match. We're happy with this. Now at this stage, if you want to export this out to Maya, you can. All right. So, but we're going to put in a few more items. We are going to try to do the effect all within Fusion first, and then I will show you how you can export this out as a FBX into Maya. Okay, so now we're going to bring in a texture so that we can put it onto this table. So again, click on the load node, and I'm going to bring in a sci-fi UI sequence table. I already prepared one. Okay, so okay, I brought it into the background screen, which is not exactly what I want. So sometimes this happens is because one of the merge node is selected. So make sure none of the nodes are selected. Then I'm gonna bring in the node again. Okay, so right now the table, I'm gonna split this into two. So to view this, this is actually a image sequence showing this very nice UI sequence. So I'm going to link this to the ground plane as a image texture. So let me just zoom in. So the ground plane, let me just rename this. I'm gonna press F2, call it table top. All right. So I'm gonna link this sequence, image sequence texture to this tabletop. Now you can link it straight away like that and it will show you the texture. Right now it's not showing anything nice. We need to look it through the camera renderer. It still shows as a wireframe. So if you want to see it, you can click on software renderer and you should be able to see the image. But the colors looks a bit strange and a bit distorted. Okay, so to change it to the correct colors, I'm going to disconnect it. We need to create a material. All right, so right now I'm looking through the camera tracker renderer. We first must create a material. So shift space, I'm going to create a material, blend, and then I'm going to connect this into blend, and you can actually preview what the blend material looks like. So this is what the material looks like. Okay, and you can click on blend. You can adjust things like the opacity, the intensity, specular. For example, if I don't want specular, I can just reduce this. All right, then finally, I can just drag and then attach this to the tabletop. Okay, so as I play back, you can see the material start to appear. All right, but this is a solid color material. So I'm going to go to the blend, and then I'm going to reduce the opacity so that it shines through. Okay, you will notice that the UI texture is actually upside down, right? So if you want to rotate this, you have to rotate the tabletop. Okay, so I'm going to click on the tabletop, and then I'm going to rotate it along the y-axis plus 0.63. So just going to type 180 here, and now it rotates the 3D plane or the ground plane, which in this case is the tabletop. Okay. So what about if you want to create a floating menu right in front of her? Okay, so instead of doing the things, creating the table, or rather creating a user interface from scratch, we can actually borrow the table, select the tabletop, okay, press Ctrl C, and make sure you click away, otherwise you will connect to the new page will connect to the tabletop. Ctrl V to create another tabletop, but instead of calling this tabletop, I'm going to press F2 and call this floating UI, and click OK. And I'm going to also duplicate the blend, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and then I'm going to link it to this floating UI, and then the source texture, I'm going to load in another new one, which is the floating UI which I have prepared. Then I'm going to link it to the blend and just join it to this whole work. So right now I have two UIs, one is the table and one is the floating UI stacked on top of each other. So I want to take the floating UI, I can select its transform, and then I can translate it vertically up right in front of her, and then I can rotate it in the x-axis 0 degrees. Okay, and then if the Y rotation is off, you can adjust it as well. Okay, and then maybe the Z, just rotate it to level it out. Okay, so in the 3D space, I'm going to show this in viewport 1, so that to zoom out, I can see holding the Alt middle mouse click will zoom it out. You can see the two planes over there. Okay, so this floating UI, you can select this and then push it further away from her. Okay, and also the image is distorted. So for the floating UI, I'm going to change the scale in the x-axis and translate it higher a little bit in front of her. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so if I play back, you should be able to see all the UI stuff appearing in front of her. Okay, if for some reason you want to bring in or you want to export this to FBX into Maya to create other 3D objects, you can also do the same thing. Okay, so but before I do that, I'm going to show you something that doesn't look right. If you look over here, you notice that the texture is cutting into her fingers. All right, so what we are seeing is the final render. So what we want to do is that we want to bring in another layer, another video layer of her. And then we want this to cut through. We want to create a roto mask to cut through her fingers so that it doesn't look strange like that. Right? So we need to create a couple of masks for this table. Right? So to do that, we need to pipe in our original footage and merge it together with the output of this. So I'm going to create a merge, 3D merge, or actually rather a merge, just a merge. And then I'm going to pipe the original footage as a, okay, let me just merge it in first, and then we'll see the result of the merge. Okay, so now this is not what I want. I want the original footage to be behind. Okay, so I'm going to disconnect this. I'm going to drag, I'm going to right mouse click and drag and drop it here. Remember, right mouse click and drag the point and drop it here, and instead of the foreground, we put it at the background. Sorry, my mistake. Foreground should be the foreground. So right mouse click on this, and then this one is the foreground. Yes. Okay, so the camera tracker result is the foreground, and then the original is the background. So we need to apply a mask onto the camera tracker. So we're just going to create a mask, and we will start to draw. Okay, I'm just going to create a simple mask here. All right, so I think I did everything in reverse, so I need to invert this. And then now you can see the mask is working. Now, I will not spend the time to animate the mask, but this is basically how you do it. Okay, let me organize my notes a bit. Now, if you want to put this note in the corner, you can hold down to the Alt key so that it can flow a little bit nicer. Okay, Alt, holding down the Alt key. Okay, so this one, we're going to call it the finger mask. So you will have to animate all these points to follow the fingers. So that is how you create the mask, right? So the result would be the merge. So this is the final result. Okay, so as promised, I want to show you how you can export all of this as FBX. So to export the FBX, you select the merge, okay, the export result of the camera tracker, right? You need to link it to a FBX write node. So Shift spacebar, type FBX exporter, and then you need to tell Fusion where you want to save this file. So in this case, I'm going to save it to my folder, and this one, yeah, call this version 2, and save. And then you need to run a render. So you need to click on render and start render. Then and it's done. So we can go and check out the exported result. Okay, so this is the second version that I exported. So let's go over quickly to Maya. So this is the previous version which I've exported. Okay, so I'm going to start a new one. File import, FBX, and import. And you have the two user interface and the camera texture, or rather the image texture. So if you look through the camera, right, there is the camera background, which I don't need. I can delete this. Right, I have the two user interface here. I can change it to wireframe. Then I'm going to change my background by bringing in my image plane. Which I believe is this one, yes. Okay, and then change this into the image sequence, and this should be playing at 24 frames a second. Okay, I did not change my project settings to 24 frames. Okay, this footage is actually should be playing back at 24 frames a second. Let me just change this. Okay, so you can see everything matches up. Okay, so you can actually create, render your stuff, and then recomposite it back into Fusion again. All right. So essentially, that is how you set up a match move for this particular shot, because remember, match moving for each shot is very unique. Now for this shot, if you follow the settings that I've demonstrated in the video, you should be able to get the exact same results. Alright, I hope you find this video helpful, and yeah, give it a shot.